On this week's edition of the Coach's Corner podcast, we're gearing up for week one of the NFL preseason, and many people don't believe in preseason or don't like to watch preseason, but I tell you what, preseason is very important towards the beginning of the regular season for the NFL, and there are many reasons why, and we'll discuss that later on the show as we cover the week one preseason games. We're going to go over all the matchups later on here in the show. And also, latest news around the NFL, we're going to talk about the Bennett Brothers and their statements that they made towards the NFL, and also Jay Cutler. Also, Josh Norman continues to struggle at training camp with the Washington Redskins, and we're going to analyze why. We're going to ask the question, is it because he had a better system on the defensive side of the ball in Carolina, more support, more of a pass rush, or is it because that Washington completely is terrible on defense and they have been for many years? We'll get to that point later. Also, introducing a new segment on the Coach's Corner podcast with football season kicking off. We're going to be in full effect with what we call a 2-minute warning, and it's going to be a 2-minute segment where we cover the latest NFL news that doesn't necessarily warrant really too much talking points from myself or anybody else. It's kind of a quick rundown of the latest news going on around the league. Also, the Broncos quarterback battle continues to heat up in Dove Valley as the Denver Broncos continue their preseason campaign and training camp and what they call Champ Camp on Twitter. The battle between Mark Sanchez, Trevor Siemian, and Paxton Lynch continues to heat up, and we're going to see exactly where this position battle is going to be headed as soon as preseason kicks off next week when Denver takes on the Chicago Bears. We're going to cover that matchup. We're going to cover that whole storyline as much as, the other things. Also with the running back depth chart battle as well. Between C.J. Anderson, Ronnie Hillman, and Devontae Booker. And then also, who's fighting to get that number 3 wide receiver spot for the Denver Broncos? And will Emmanuel Sanders be re-signed? We're going to cover all that. The latest Denver Bronco news here on the Coach's Corner podcast, your number one source for Denver Bronco news, NFL analysis, and much more as we get ready to kick off that football is back this Sunday with the Colts taking on the Packers in the Hall of Fame game. I tell you what, I'm excited. Football's back. We don't have to wait too much longer, only a couple more days, and guess what? We got football until February. So, great news on that, and we're going to cover all that and much more on today's edition of the Coach's Corner podcast. This is the Coach's Corner podcast, brought to you by CodyWork18.com. Alrighty, welcome back to the Coach's Corner podcast, brought to you by CodyWork18.com and iHeartRadio. Yes, it's been a great transition the last couple of weeks ever since iHeartRadio has picked up the Coach's Corner podcast. So now you can go to iHeartRadio and you can access every single past episode of the show, but dating back to season 1. We got a lot of great episodes for you. Obviously, a few episodes including former NFL safety Nick Ferguson, who was on the show last week. Always great to have his mind and his analysis and perspective here on the Coach's Corner podcast. A lot of great guests last year. A little different episode last season. In season 1, episode 4 with my good friend Tomas. We had a great recollection of our childhood. So if you want to laugh and you want to go through some of my old childhood memories growing up, go to episode 4 called Spousal Arguments and Broken Greenhouses, season 4. Check that out on iHeartRadio and also CodyWork18.com. When you go to the website, click on the right-hand tab that says Coach's Corner Podcast. You can go down and you can access every single episode, past, present, and future, through Spreaker, Android, Apple, iTunes as well. Also, now iHeartRadio. So very excited to have the platform out there. Also, the show is also on YouTube and whatnot. So it's been a blessing, obviously, being picked up by iHeartRadio, which is, broadcasted to millions of people around the world. Whether it's radio stations, podcasts, whatever it may be, the audience is always great. So I've been very grateful for the last couple of weeks and just the transition of going from Spreaker to iHeartRadio to iTunes and having the platform out there on a much bigger basis. So, I'm sure there's more exciting things going on in the future for this show. Also, please head to iTunes for me and go on and leave a review. Write a review. I'll read your guys' reviews here on the show. I'll read a couple here in a little bit as well. But this week on the podcast, I think the main emphasis is that, obviously with training camp starting up, we're in a period of transition where now also we're approaching preseason play. And I think that's important to understand because, a lot of people, especially fans, people who don't cover the NFL don't really invest too much into preseason, and it's all because they think it's too boring. They don't get to see the starters play as long as they want them to. But people tend to forget exactly what preseason is all about. And I can tell you what, preseason is all about these younger guys trying to fight for a roster spot. And people don't realize that. A lot of these rookies, guys that go undrafted or get drafted in the middle to late rounds in the NFL draft, they're trying to secure a job somewhere. And this is their best opportunity to do it. I mean, you get your reps in training camp. You got to make the most of it. But when preseason comes on, you got to play big. And that's exactly what a lot of these guys do. And I don't think many people understand that aspect to it. The NFL roster during the regular season can only be 53. I think they're going to extend it a little bit for certain situations. But I think that people tend to depreciate the value of what preseason really is. And they say it's boring. I think it's fun to watch because you get to see a lot of these young competitive guys trying to make a roster spot. And there are a lot of great players out there that don't make it on a roster, but for the current team they're on in training camp, but they make a roster mid-season or they get picked up by a team maybe early on in the regular season, mid-regular season, because of injuries, and then they get their opportunity to go out there and play football and to make an impact and also to provide for their family. So, I think that's a thing that I look at preseason. Obviously, we've experienced injuries in preseason before. Last year, we saw Jordy Nelson tear his ACL, I think, on the first snap of the game against Pittsburgh last year in preseason. So, there's always these storylines that go on during preseason. Obviously, I think the drama around preseason obviously involves the cuts, people being cut, and then also Hard Knocks. We get to see Hard Knocks on HBO starting August 9th, which is next week, and next Tuesday night. I think the thing is with Hard Knocks, and people don't understand, is I saw this on Twitter too. I saw a reporter who was covering the NFL training camp, and he was going on about how coaches cuss and they curse and they use profanity, and I kind of wonder if they ever played the sport of football, because if you've ever played football, whether it be high school, college, professional, coaches use profanity. Okay, that's just a natural given, and it's not necessarily they use profanity towards a player. They do it in expression towards a play or something like that, and Bill O'Brien last year, I mean, it was epic. And then we saw Rex Ryan a couple years back on the New York Jets training camp. Many people were blown away that these coaches curse. We don't see that on cameras on Sundays and Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. We don't see that stuff on cameras. But when you get, a show, a documentary series like, All In with the Arizona Cardinals during the season, and then you got the Hard Knocks with the St. Louis Rams that we're going to be seeing here next week. You look at all those and you get the inside access, what goes on in the locker room, out there on the practice field, things like that. So people need to lighten up a little bit. It's football. That's exactly how it is, and it's never been anything different. So let's read a couple of reviews here on the podcast that people have left. I've gotten 6 5-star ratings, and pretty much I have no other ratings outside of that. Noah Swartz says, a great podcast with even better insight. Sal, the kid, says, great podcast. Love that I can come and listen to the latest news around the sports world and the Broncos. Kyler Jaramillo says, greatest podcast of all time. Huge Pats fan here and love how he involves all teams in the NFL. Great podcast. Javon says, coach or genius? I think both. This guy knows his facts. Every athlete should be listening to this show. No questions asked. Coach Cody is the bomb. So go on there. Go on iTunes, please. Leave a review for me. Read them on the show. And if you ever want to be on the Coach's Corner podcast, just reach out to me on Twitter at Cody Rourke NFL. And also just send me an email. Go to CodyRourke18.com. Click on the contact page. Send me an email, a message. I'll get it. If you want to be on the show, you want to talk sports, let me know. We'll get you on here. We'll talk about the latest news. And then if you want to talk about whatever team you want, we'll talk about that. And I'll bring the heat on you if it's a Pats fan or any other kind of fan, especially Raiders fans. So, you know what? I'm very excited, okay? Obviously, this Sunday, we've got the NFL Hall of Fame game. Obviously, the Hall of Fame's on Saturday. You got the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Green Bay Packers in a Hall of Fame game. And, it's kind of a really cool testament to honor those in Canton, Ohio who get inducted into the Hall of Fame, past and present. And I think the exciting thing about that is we get to see football, okay? It's been a long time. It's been since February 6, 2016, since we've been able to see football on the field, an actual game type situation. So it's exciting to see that back. And, in the NFL this year, we're without names like Peyton Manning. And then obviously Tom Brady's going to be out for 4 games due to being suspended. So we're in a new era, kind of, the guys, the stable names at the quarterback position. Obviously, you still got Eli Manning, you got Ben Roethlisberger, those guys. But a majority of the NFL and their quarterbacks are young guys that are developing, young guys that are making a name for themselves. I mean, you got Aaron Rodgers, a guy who I think a few years ago nobody knew about, and then he stepped in after Brett Favre retired, and, Brett Favre pulled his shenanigans and tried to come back. Aaron Rodgers has become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think he is the best quarterback right now in the NFL. Bar none. It all depends upon his offensive line. If he's got an offensive line and he has time to throw, he's the best quarterback in the NFL. And then you got Tom Brady, who's one of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL as well. But the NFL will be different this year without Peyton Manning. So we got to experience that. We got to see what new era quarterbacks, what rivalries can we even look forward to going forward. And I'd say probably Joe Flacco versus Ben Roethlisberger is probably going to be the most stable name, and you got, or maybe even Andy Dalton versus Ben Roethlisberger. Other than that, outside of the quarterback spot, I don't really think there's any matchups that are as intriguing as Brady and Manning ever was. So, with that said, with Peyton Manning being gone and, all these younger quarterbacks, obviously Brock Osweiler went to the Houston Texans, but you got a lot of young quarterbacks in the NFL that are vying for a starting spot, and a lot of it is very competitive. Outside of maybe 15 to 20 franchises in the NFL, there's a lot of competition at the quarterback spot opening up, especially through training camp, and specifically with the Denver Broncos. It's a battle between 3 quarterbacks for the number 1 spot. Only one can get it. So that's going to be an interesting element for us to analyze and to see going forward. But before we get into all that, I just want to thank DDP Yoga for being the official home workout of the Coach's Corner podcast. DDP Yoga has incorporated a lot of great things, a lot of great ways to keep your body healthy. And if you're experiencing any back pain, knee pain, any body pain whatsoever, his program really helps address that and can help you heal and move forward. It's done tremendous wonders for me after ACL reconstructive surgery. I decided to do DDP Yoga after hearing so much great things about it. I went through all that, and then after that, I've been doing it every single day ever since I signed up back, I'd probably say 4 or 5 months ago. So it's been a tremendous help for me. Obviously, it's helped me with my knee recovery. I've broken up so much scar tissue, and the best thing about it is I don't always have to just take the DVDs with me wherever I go. I've now got the DDP Yoga Now app on my phone, Apple and Android stores, where you can take your DDP Yoga program with you everywhere you go. So follow DDP on Twitter at RealDDP, and then also the DDP Yoga program at DDP Yoga on Twitter. And then head over to ddpyoga.com and sign up today to change your life. I tell you what, if you're on the fence right now, if you're thinking to yourself, I need to make a change, my back's always hurting, my hips are always hurting, my knees hurt, my neck hurts, I need a change, I don't want to feel pain anymore, I tell you what, recommend DDP Yoga. Give it a try. And if you like it, let me know, okay? I tell you what, it's changed my life, and I hope it can change yours. So with that, we're going to get into our first topic of the day, and it's regarding the Bennett brothers, Martellus and Michael Bennett, and some statements they made. So they joined Mina Kimes on ESPN's The Magazine, and she asked them to say something. So she'd name off a person's name, and they'd have to say what they thought. So the first name that was brought up was Jay Cutler, and Michael Bennett responded, worst quarterback in the NFL. And Michael Bennett's had this thing over the years where he's always talking about mediocre quarterbacks who get these lucrative contracts. And a lot of this comes from Michael Bennett trying to get a contract extension of his own. Obviously, Seattle hasn't done that yet, and I think there's a good reason why. I think Michael Bennett, first and foremost, he's an impacting guy on that defense, but you look at the pieces around him on defense at the tackle position, also at linebacker and safety and corner. He's got a lot of supporting casts that really make him look better than he truly is, and that's my firm opinion based on watching game film. I think Michael Bennett's a little overrated. I don't even think he's in the top 5 of defensive ends in this game. Plain and simple. I think there's 5 defensive ends in this league that are a lot better than him. But I think the more interesting quote that we heard came from Martellus Bennett, former target of Jay Cutler. He played with him for a few years in Chicago, and now Martellus is on the New England Patriots. But he didn't hold back when he said that he would be open and Cutler would throw into double coverage. I think when you look at the fact when Chicago lost Brandon Marshall, they had 2 targets. Obviously they wanted Kevin White to be a target for them, but he suffered that injury, and he was never really able to play at all last year. So this will actually be his first year playing, and I'm hopeful he can make an impact for that Chicago team. But they had Alshon Jeffrey and Martellus Bennett last year. Jay Cutler did. And there were a lot of times Jay Cutler would throw to Martellus Bennett because he was a red zone threat. He was a big guy, but Bennett didn't hold back when he said he'd be open. He'd throw into double coverage. Which kind of goes against the grain when we look back at how Martellus Bennett used to play Jay Cutler. Bennett, a couple years ago compared Jay Cutler to Jesus, which was, I think it was a weird thing, but obviously they had a good bond as teammates. You know what? So I think, with Jay Cutler, I feel bad for Jay Cutler because Jay Cutler draws in a lot of criticism from guys. I mean, most notably Brian Urlacher and now Martellus Bennett, former teammates of him, have always come out and have said stuff with him. So with that, Chicago Bears wide receiver Kevin White kind of went on to defend Jay Cutler from all the criticism and everything like that, saying, Jay Cutler is a good person. He wants to win. He's a good teammate, and he cares a lot. He is not selfish at all. Any selfish quarterback would have told me to come back and play at the end of the season, even at 75%. He's just a great guy. We need to clean Jay's name up. He has had a bad rep for no reason, and I don't like it. I came in, and everyone was telling me, Jay's an asshole. You're going to hate Cutler. I was like, I want to get to know the dude first, and it's not true at all. None of it. Jay's like the pretty girl that doesn't wear makeup and doesn't go out, so nobody really knows that she's pretty. I'd say every comment that Kevin White made right there leading up to the pretty girl analysis and comparison, I'd say it's on point. I think the last part was kind of needed. It was kind of a weird comparison. But you know what? I think Jay Cutler gets that bad rep. I mean, he's got the whole feedback from people saying he's a crybaby. You know what, Jay Cutler, I've seen Jay Cutler do a lot of great things. When Jay Cutler was on the Denver Broncos quarterback, he drew in a lot of criticism. He came in, replaced Jake Plummer in the last game of the regular season back in 2006 when the night that they lost and they would have went to the playoffs. They lost that game, unfortunately. I think, and then he got traded with the whole Josh McDaniels, situation with McDaniels coming in and not wanting anything to do with him. I think with the whole thing that sparked that was the fact that McDaniels wanted to get Matt Cassell, who played for him in New England, to come in and play quarterback for the Broncos. He tried trading him. So Cutler wasn't too happy about that. Ended up getting traded to the Chicago Bears. And the rest is history. But, the Bennett brothers outside of the Chicago comments went on to really kind of bash a lot of people, and most notably the one that I think that I can agree with them the most on is, Brock Osweiler was brought up, and Michael Bennett told him, I've got more sacks and he's got touchdowns, obviously referring to the fact that Brock Osweiler signed a 4-year deal that was worth $72 million after just making 7 starts in 4 years for the Denver Broncos after Peyton Manning got hurt. So I can understand the criticism on that. Martellus Bennett jumped on that and said that he's caught more balls than he's completed. And that being Martellus Bennett's caught 348 passes in his career, and Osweiler's only completed 187 in just 7 games. But, I agree with them on that. I think Osweiler got a contract, and, he's not really proven, and John Elway wouldn't overpay for him. So I'm looking forward to when Brock Osweiler comes to Denver to play the Broncos. I know the defense is looking forward to it as well. But the next guy the Bennett brothers went after was Eli Manning. Martellus Bennett said this really I don't know. This was an awkward comment. I think it's very unwarranted as well. But Martellus Bennett said in regards to Eli Manning, he's cool. He's like a normal white guy you see at the park trying to teach his kids how to play soccer, and you know he can't really play soccer himself. I have no idea what he truly means by that, but I'm pretty sure that Eli Manning as a quarterback has done a lot of great things. You know, he had a couple years where he really struggled in a terrible system. Last year he had a great year in Ben McAdoo's system. So Martellus Bennett, I think these guys are just trying to get some publicity. They're trying to talk, and he's trying to hop on that bashing the New York Giants, all because the fact that, you know, they always play each year and the Giants have always beaten the Patriots. So maybe he's trying to fit into a Patriot mantra as well. But that was really awkward. They also went on to call, you know, they talked about J.J. Watt. Michael Bennett called him a dominant player. Martellus Bennett called him a corny player, which didn't – I mean, none of that stuff really, really makes sense to me, honestly, because I just don't get it. J.J. Watt has been one of the most dominant football players on the defensive side of the ball in many years. Michael Bennett seems to recognize that. Martellus Bennett, however, I don't think he knows what he's talking about, going in and saying that he's a corny player. You know what? He's a personality. He's an NFL personality. You see NFL personalities all the time. You got Odell Beckham Jr. Okay, you had Troy Polamalu because of his hair, but J.J. Watt's a dominant guy because, you know, he kicks people's ass in football, and you know, he likes to have fun, and you can tell he likes to have fun out there on the field. And he's always in he's in the media. He's always doing fun things. He's always doing great things for people. So I don't know how you can call him corny, you know. So I think really Martellus Bennett is really just doing a lot right now to stir up some controversy, things like that. So a lot of people weren't too happy about it. Jay Cutler fired back at what Michael Bennett said. You know, obviously with training camp, you know, media day, at the end of the day, they always ask him questions. And Jay Cutler responded to what Martellus Bennett and Michael Bennett said by saying, most receivers and tight ends think they are always open. Hopefully Tom Brady can do a better job of finding him than I did. You know, he kind of played it coy a little bit. You know, necessarily, he didn't really respond to what Michael Bennett said about him. You know, instead he said, I could say something clever and smart, but I'll just pass. You know, and everyone likes to try to give Jay Cutler a bad rap. You know, I think Jay Cutler could have easily fired back, but, you know, he chose not to. And that says a lot about where Jay Cutler is with his character. So I think that the Bennett brothers are doing this for a little bit of publicity and relevance. Obviously, I mean, Martellus Bennett, you signed with the New England Patriots, and, you know, they're having a quiet offseason in terms of making moves. But Tom Brady being suspended the first 4 games, they need something going on to get them talking. Obviously, Michael Bennett's trying to get a new contract extension, so they got to find a way to stay relevant. So they're going to go ahead and try to tear down other players' names. I think Michael Bennett's overrated. I think Martellus Bennett's a great tight end. But you know, the way, you know, you don't say that about your former quarterback after being all buddy-buddy. That's the thing I don't like. If you're an NFL guy, you're going to say bad about a guy who got you the ball, man. You know, at one day, if you decide to do great things, if you decide to get a Hall of Fame career, you better thank that guy because he got you to where you are. So Jay Cutler, pretty much made Martellus Bennett who he is. So we'll see how he does in the Patriot system. Obviously, it might be good. Obviously, you got a guy like Tom Brady throwing to you. That won't happen to week 5, but Jimmy Garoppolo for the first 4 weeks is going to throw to Gronkowski and Bennett. They might go more double tight sets now than they did last year. Obviously, they had Scott Chandler last year, but they got a more formidable guy out in Martellus Bennett. So I think that's the dynamic duo out there at the tight end position for the New England Patriots as well. But the comments are pretty unwarranted. I'm not a big believer in what the comments said. I'm not really too interested in it. I'm eager to see how some of these guys respond. I think based on some of the comments, obviously when the Patriots play the Giants or if they play the Texans, you know, I think they're going to go after they're going to go after Martellus Bennett, some guys on the defensive side of the ball for that comment as well. So another training camp thing that we're going to cover is Josh Norman. You know, the Carolina Panthers placed him on the franchise tag during the offseason and then quickly got rid of it. and he became a free agent and ended up signing a $75 million deal with the Washington Redskins. And if you've been on Facebook, social media, you've been seeing that Josh Norman's had a very difficult time at training camp covering receivers. And you see a lot of one-on-one drills with him and Desean Jackson, Pierre Garcon, and they're toasting him. They're burning him, and it's not even close. So this warrants the fact that should he give his $75 million back? Because when I recall that the Cowboys and the Cardinals played on Thanksgiving, and Josh Norman played against Dez Bryant, and Carolina absolutely destroyed the Cowboys. Josh Norman, after the game, said that, while on the field, he yelled that Dez Bryant should give the Cowboys his $75 million back. Now I'm asking the same question. Should Josh Norman give the Washington Redskins his $75 million back? Because when we look at it, he really didn't have any pieces around him here in Washington that he did in Carolina. And we look at the Carolina Panthers defense that was in the top 10 in the NFL. They were number 2 behind the Denver Broncos. They had guys like Todd Davis and Luke Kuechly on the inside. They had tremendous defensive ends and tackle pressure that could get to quarterbacks that helped make the defensive back job a lot easier. So they played a lot of cover 2 man out there in Carolina. And a lot of times that allowed Josh Norman to be a little aggressive, to be able to play that press man-to-man coverage with safety help over the top. And Josh Norman thrived in that system because he had guys who could get to the quarterback and make his job a lot easier. I can tell you what, as a cornerback myself, cornerback is one of the most demanding positions in football. It's very hard. You're going to go up against a lot of great guys. I tell you what makes your job so much easier. When you have a defense on the field that has tremendous pass rush, that can get to the quarterback, that maintains gap integrity, has linebackers that can cover and blitz, and has safeties that can play over the top and not get beat, you can be physical as a corner, and you're going to thrive in that system. You're going to look very good. That's exactly what gets a lot of NFL players paid. And when you look at the Denver Broncos defense and why they're so great, they have that exact same nucleus. They've got ends that can keep contained. They got guys like Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, Shane Ray, Shaquille Barrett that can get to the quarterback. They got inside linebackers who can cover, and Brandon Marshall and Todd Davis or Corey Nelson for the Denver Broncos. They got defensive backs. They got corners in Chris Harris Jr. and Aqib Talib. And they got a guy like Bradley Roby who can cover in the slot. They got safeties TJ Ward and Darian Stewart. You got a pretty tremendous defense, guys who do their job. And you look at why Denver's defense was so successful. And the cornerbacks and the defensive backs also thrived because they had a tremendous pass rush. So they're already great cover corners. You cover really well in the NFL and you have a great pass rush. The recipe for winning games is pretty damn easy, and you're going to have a lot of success on the defensive side of the ball when you can do just that. And I think that Josh Norman lacks that so far this year. I don't think he's going to have that. I honestly don't. I think that Josh Norman is going to struggle because they don't have guys on that Washington Redskins defense that can necessarily pass rush. Obviously, Junior Gillette just tore his Achilles once again. He'll be out. He was a big player for them, and I just don't see how the Redskins can really compete in the NFC East next year defensively when you got teams like the Dallas Cowboys, you got the New York Giants, you got the Philadelphia Eagles. We don't know what the Eagles are going to look like yet under Doug Peterson, but I can tell you this. The Cowboys, if Tony Romo's healthy and Dez Bryant are healthy, they're going to score. They're going to score points if Tony Romo doesn't throw an interception like he usually always does, or if Dez Bryant doesn't catch it like he normally always does. Dez didn't catch it. You got the Giants that got Odell Beckham Jr., you got Eli Manning, you got guys like Sterling Shepard, and you got guys like Victor Cruz returning. You got some threats out there. So if they can't get a good defense on the field in Washington, they're going to struggle, and Josh Norman's not going to have a good season. They're going to struggle immensely if they can't have a good pass rush and get to the quarterback. Because I'm telling you, in that division right now, I think they're at the bottom of that division. I think it's up in the air between them and Philadelphia, between who's at the bottom division. I think, obviously, the division this year right now, and just my firm opinion, is between the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. I think those teams are going to win the division by default. I think it's going to be a lot more competitive this year than it was last year. I think that Eli Manning's going to have a great year, but when I look at the Washington Redskins, I see so many unanswered questions. I think their offense will be solid, okay? Obviously losing Alfred Morris hurts at the running back position, but obviously, you have Kirk Cousins, and you got Jordan Cameron last year, or Jordan Reed, my apologies, I was confusing him with the Miami Dolphins tight end, but you got Jordan Reed, who came out of, had a great year. He came out of a shell last year with Kirk Cousins and caught a lot of touchdowns. He was a big playmaker, big target for them. And then obviously you got weapons like Desean Jackson, Pierre, Garcon. I think Washington's offense will be okay, but my concern for this Washington Redskins team is necessarily and definitely on their defense. They got so many unanswered questions out there. You got guys like Dookie and Nacho, who was injured a majority of last season. Is he going to come in and play well? I mean, he's a former Denver Bronco. He played kind of well in that system. He was kind of a big playmaker trying to fight a roster spot at one point in training camp before they went to the Super Bowl, and Dookie and Nacho got completely exposed by Seattle, and he struggled with tackling, and eventually Denver didn't re-sign him because it just wasn't worth it. And then so you got those unanswered questions there. You got Josh Norman. You got David Bruton, who's joining Dookie and Nacho as a former Denver Bronco in that Washington Redskins secondary. I think David Bruton's going to make an impact for them. However, I just think that they don't have enough pieces around that defense to really make them relevant or even more so competitive and consistent, which you need to have consistent defensive play in the NFL if you want to win, especially in a division where you got guys like Odell Beckham Jr., who we're obviously going to see that matchup between him and Josh Norman twice a year now. However, I think with what I've been seeing at practice with Desean Jackson, who's, arguably the fastest guy in the NFL at the wide receiver spot outside of Tavon Austin, I think you've got a lot of matchup problems that offenses are going to exploit against that defense, and they're going to test Josh Norman based on what they're seeing so far. So, you know what? Josh Norman is how I like my toast, and that's burnt. It's going to be interesting to follow. We're going to continue to follow that, continue to see if he struggles throughout training camp, and we're going to see how he does in the first couple of games of preseason. He'll probably play the first couple of games and probably will sit the last two games as they get ready for the regular season opener as well. So a lot of just different things to follow regarding that situation. I'm having a good time discussing it and laughing about it with a lot of guys, especially my DBs, about how Josh Norman, I think, is overrated. I think Josh Norman is overrated. If I recall a few years ago, I don't remember really hearing Josh Norman's name at all. Okay, and then when you add pieces on that defense, look at Josh Norman 2 years ago when they got completely thumped by Seattle in the wild card round. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything at all, and he was awful. He was tremendously awful. You had guys like Luke Kuechly, but you didn't have the pieces that you had last year on that defensive ball a couple years ago when Cam Chancellor blocked the PAT, I think, twice in a row before actually doing it, and then having that pick six that sealed the game against the Carolina Panthers a couple years ago. Josh Norman was nobody, and then this year, because they're having success through winning games, now you're starting to hear Josh Norman's name a little bit more. And he's 30 years old. Okay, it's not like he's a 2-year player or he's a rookie in the NFL. No, he's been in the league for a little bit. Okay, so I honestly think he's overrated. I think he's going to get, he's being exposed at training camp. I think he's going to get exposed this year against Victor Cruz and Odell Beckham Jr., Des Bryant as well. I just think that's exactly what we're going to see. So when we come back from commercial break, we're going to talk about some other news, obviously the Broncos quarterback battle, and we're going to look at all the Week 1 preseason NFL matchups and discuss our excitement for how awesome it is to have football back. I'm jacked. Right now I could run through a wall. So when we return for a commercial break, we're going to discuss all that and much more.
This is iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio makes you want to move.
When you have a great melody, a song can last
Forever. Instantly connected.
I love it when the beat goes boom.
iHeartRadio is the way I get to you.
The biggest song, the biggest artist.
All in one place.
iHeartRadio.
I'll see you there.
The four of us, we never missed a game. Then life, jobs, kids, new cities. It was time we got back together. A few minutes on NFL Ticket Exchange, and we were set. 4 100% authentic, real deal tickets to the Niners. From one fan to another. There's nothing better than this.
there's no place like home. Get your tickets today at NFL.com.
Welcome back to the Coach's Corner podcast, brought to you by CodyRourke18.com and iHeartRadio. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at CodyRourkeNFL. Send us your tweets, thoughts, analysis, and send us a review. If you like the show, if you want to be on the show, tweet me. Let me know. I'll always respond, and I'll do my best to schedule you here on the show. If you want to do it, I'd be more than welcome to have you here on the show. So with that, let's dive into our newest topic, which is called the 2-minute warning. We're going to cover some news that not necessarily is news that we want to majorly discuss, maybe taking 5 to 10 minutes talking about here on the show, but something we're going to get through quick that is kind of relevant to it. So Nick Foles, former quarterback that was just released from the St. Louis Rams, a former Philadelphia Eagle as well, after being released, is heading to Kansas City to reunite with head coach Andy Reid. And this certainly does make the Kansas City quarterback dilemma a little more interesting. And why I say that is because you got Alex Smith, you got Kevin Hogan, you just drafted from Stanford, and you also have Nick Foles now, who reunites with Andy Reid, who played for Andy Reid, and it kind of makes the dynamic similar. So if we're ever in a situation where Alex Smith struggles at quarterback, you may see Nick Foles in there. You may see Kevin Hogan. It depends on the offensive system. So that's going to be an interesting news, certainly for a team that doesn't necessarily need a quarterback. I think they may be bringing him in to be the backup to Alex Smith so they can develop Kevin Hogan as well. I'm eager to see how this plays out and see what potential storylines may come of it throughout the regular season, depending on injury or bad play. You know, it's something that we're going to follow here shortly, especially after Nick Foles was just with the Los Angeles Rams and was cut from them as they decided to head in a new direction. Navarro Bowman, defensive stud linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers, has just signed a 4-year, $20 million guaranteed contract extension that will keep him with the San Francisco 49ers. And this deal right here makes Navarro Bowman the second highest paid inside linebacker in the NFL, obviously behind Luke Kuechly, who's an absolute stud. Last year, Bowman led the league in tackles. He compiled a total of 154 tackles and 2.5 sacks for the San Francisco 49ers in a defense that struggled drastically last year. He was the only bright spot on that team. And a lot of it said, you know, it's very earned for Navarro Bowman, who came off that devastating leg injury we saw in the playoffs against Seattle a few years back, where he tore his ACL, MCL, PCL. It was a nasty injury, you know, where fans ended up throwing popcorn and stuff at him as he went through the tunnel, which was kind of distasteful as well. But, you know, he battled back from that devastating injury, and he dominated offenses last year. And he was the bright spot on that San Francisco 49ers team that didn't have a lot of hope. And so now he's playing back. He's got the extension. He's going to be playing under Chip Kelly. Got to hope that they can actually put together a defense this year and actually compete. And, you know, if they do, they may be making some noise in that NFC West division. So with that, we're going to move on, okay? Obviously, training camp's going on. The Denver Broncos are in Dub Valley competing, and roster spots are being won and lost, and people are looking forward to what's going on. So the main question, and I was on the Coach Les show on Tuesday to talk about this with Coach Les, and we talked about the Denver Broncos quarterback spot and some of our expectations. And you know, one thing Coach Les and I agreed with was that at the beginning of the year, obviously when we knew that Mark Sanchez was traded to the Denver Broncos, the expectation was between us is that we were hoping and we were expecting that Trevor Siemian would be the guy taking over the quarterback reins for the Denver Broncos. And they drafted Paxton Lynch, a move that I predicted Denver would do back in November of last year. So, you know, kind of ahead of that, you know, I may be the Mystic Mac. We'll see. But, and then you get Mark Sanchez, you got Trevor Siemian, and you have Paxton Lynch. And so this has been the debate, you know, the quarterback spot in Denver. Kubiak is he hasn't really named anybody as a starter. You know, Mark Sanchez and Siemian have both gotten reps with the number one team, and Paxton Lynch has gotten some work with the week. But, you know, if I could best the Broncos quarterback battle at training camp so far to be up and down, as Gary Kubiak would also correlate, is the fact that, you know, there are times Mark Sanchez has looked really, really good in practice, and there are times he's looked like Mark Sanchez. And then you got, you know, Trevor Siemian, who's had a year up on Mark Sanchez and Paxton Lynch on knowing what the playbook is, what, you know, the expectations are, you know, is apparently plateaued. And, you know, outside of that, having the 1 year advantage, you know, has had up and down practices. You know, there are times he looks good. A lot of them are characterizing him to be the guy who's going to throw those dink and dunk passes without taking too many shots. So at this point, Denver doesn't know if that's exactly what they want. And then they want a guy like Paxton Lynch they drafted from Memphis, a guy who is an absolute playmaker for that team, and a guy who's got so many great intangibles that it kind of makes Denver Broncos fans very excited about seeing him potentially be the quarterback for the Denver Broncos either this year or a year or two down the road. And the reason I say that is he's intriguing. He's got a tremendous arm. He's got a great touch on the football, especially throwing deep. So with a good pass protection, good offensive line, if Denver can solidify a more consistent and healthy offensive line this year, obviously with the additions of Donald Stevenson at left tackle and Russell Okung at right tackle and Matt Paradise at center, you kind of got some, battle spots. Obviously Max Garcia at the guard spot, but, you got a battle at the other guard position for the offensive line. Maybe Tyson Brilo, who was a tackle last year, rookie, got hurt, put on injured reserve. Maybe he can learn guard, and it's going to be interesting. Luis Vasquez is still a free agent, so I don't know if Denver could pick him up or if they even want to. But the offensive line will be something that we're going to follow a lot closely this year, obviously, and especially in preseason as well. So when we look at that, obviously quarterback is a prime focus on where we're looking at it as a form of competition at a spot for who's going to open up the regular season. However, there's another spot on the Denver Broncos roster that also needs addressed, that also many people are fighting for a spot for, and that's the third spot at the wide receiver position. And right now, Benny Fowler is the guy who's in that number 3 wide receiver position at this point in time because he's had a tremendous camp. I think out of all the Broncos, the best training camp so far. And when you go back and you look at it and you see, he's made a lot of big catches, especially last season. And something I was talking about with Coach Les on the Coach Les show on Tuesday was the fact that you look at the Cincinnati game, late in the game when they were driving, they had to get in a field goal position to get ahead of the Cincinnati Bengals. Benny Fowler caught a huge 15-yard pass that moved the chains on 3rd and 7 and put them in field goal range to eventually, run a couple plays, kick the field goal, and then hope the defense could win the game in overtime, in which they did. And then you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers game in the divisional round. The offense for the Denver Broncos was struggling heavily that game against a very average and pretty sorry soft defense in Pittsburgh. They just couldn't get the ball out. Peyton Manning couldn't throw the ball too well necessarily. He was having a hard time, was getting hit a few times. I found Benny Fowler across the middle for probably a 25-yard gain. And the first guy, had contact on Benny Fowler, but Benny Fowler kept driving his feet and broke free from the tackle and eventually was brought down from behind by James Harrison. And he was a big guy. And then C.J. Anderson ended up punching it in for the go-ahead score that would eventually win the game for the Denver Broncos. So Benny Fowler was a very big guy last year. He obviously caught Peyton Manning's 2-point conversion in the Super Bowl, Peyton Manning's last throw. So the battle right there between the number 3 wide receiver spots kind of up for grabs right now between Benny Fowler, Jordan Norwood, and Cody Latimer. Cody Latimer, who's also on the roster bubble this year, in my opinion, has had a couple of years to try to prove his spot to be a wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and it just hasn't worked out the way that Cody Latimer or Denver Broncos organization has hoped it has. So he's trying to battle for a roster spot here, but I think Benny Fowler is going to be the guy that comes out on top and obviously secures that number 3 spot. And there's a lot of question too, because there's a possibility that whoever's the number 3 wide receiver this year will be the number 2 wide receiver next year if Denver can't come to an agreement with potential free agent wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders next year on a contract extension. So Benny Fowler, whoever's the number 3 wide receiver this year, could be the number 2 guy next year with Demaryius Thomas. So that's kind of interesting to look at, the Denver Broncos potentially without Emmanuel Sanders. They hope to get a deal done, and I imagine they probably will get a deal done. But, we're just going to have to wait and see. You got guys on the roster, some guys I don't think are going to necessarily make the roster at wide receiver because there's just too much wide receiver depth right now, but 2 guys that have stood out at practice and at training camp that I think can make the team as special teamers or practice squad guys for sure is Khalif Raymond and Sunshine Jordan Taylor. Jordan Taylor, obviously, if you've been on social media the last week and a half, you saw that he had a spectacular one-handed grab from Mark Sanchez in training camp. Is a spectacular catch. A guy that Peyton Manning has said, watch out, you're going to hear his name in the next year or two. And when you get that kind of praise from Peyton Manning, you know that you got a potentially special player. And we say that because Jordan Taylor was the guy that Peyton Manning threw to at practice, and while he was rehabbing his injury as well, he was one of the guys that Peyton Manning would go throw with. So that says a lot right there, getting that kind of praise from a legend like Peyton Manning, a guy who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. you look at the whole scenario, look at the whole situation, and I think that Jordan Taylor and Khalifa Raymond can both make the guys. Obviously, I think they're going to make the practice squad, but I think they could have a chance to make the team as special teamers. That's currently where Cody Latimer's at, as being a special teams guy. So these guys could come up this year and fill that void and make an impact at that spot on kickoff, kick return, punt return. We see it all the time. Many great guys make a career off of special teams, and we saw that. We know Terrell Davis was on the verge of quitting in the NFL until he made a great play on kickoff for the Denver Broncos in a preseason game over there in Japan. So when we saw all that, Terrell Davis ended up becoming one of the best backs in the National Football League before suffering a career-ending injury and not being able to come back. A guy who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but what Terrell Davis did was tremendous. So now people got to realize the value of special teams. They always talk about offense and defense, but they don't understand that really three elements of the game are very important towards winning and losing games. And you can lose a game on special teams, and you can still do really well on offense and defense, but special teams could be the thing that breaks you. And that's why we always preach to our kids that when we coach them is that all three phases of the game are important, and that especially accounts at the college level, high school level, and the NFL and any professional levels. So I do see that playing out as well. Also, the running back competition is going to be interesting by committee. I think by default, C.J. Anderson is going to be the guy who gets the primary carries in the system with Gary Kubiak. I think you got Andy Janovich, a guy you drafted out of Wisconsin at fullback. I think him and Juwan Thompson are going to be battling for that fullback spot. Juwan Thompson, a guy who's been a running back for Denver previously, making the move to fullback to have more of a chance to be on the field to make an impact as well. And then you got guys like Virgil Green who could play fullback, but he's looking really well at tight end. I'd have to say the running back position, though, right now on offense is the other point of concern. Not necessarily concern, but emphasis is because you got guys like Ronnie Hillman. Obviously, you re-signed Ronnie Hillman to a one-year deal to stay with the Denver Broncos. He was a big guy for Denver last year, made a couple big plays, obviously, against Minnesota on a 73-yard toss that he took for a touchdown. But then you got a guy like Devontae Booker, who's the same age as Ronnie Hillman, who's a rookie in the NFL, who kind of reminds me a lot of both C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman combined. He's a big guy. He'll run through the trenches, and he also has breakaway speed. So he and Ronnie Hillman right now, I believe, battle for getting the secondary carries for the Denver Broncos behind C.J. Anderson, who's going to be that 1-2 punch. Is it going to be C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman? Or is it going to be C.J. Anderson and Devontae Booker, rookie out of Utah that Denver drafted in the second round? I think it's going to be Devontae Booker. They're going to look at the productivity of that angle a lot more. So I think it's very interesting. I think the Denver Broncos obviously have a lot to do, and obviously there's a game that the Denver Broncos have in preseason. They open up their preseason in Chicago on August 11th. They're going to be taking on the Chicago Bears in the first preseason game. So this is going to be an awesome game. I'm looking forward to covering it. I'm looking forward to watching it and seeing how these positional battles will break down. And something else in Denver Broncos training camp that not many people are talking about, but the secondary also has a lot of depth, especially at the cornerback spot. Obviously, Kayvon Webster and Lorenzo Doss are having a tremendous training camp. According to Gary Kubiak, they held out Chris Harris Jr. on Wednesday from practice because he had a tight hamstring. They got guys like him. Aqib Talib's not practicing yet due to still recovering from that gunshot wound he suffered a few months back. He'll be ready to go here very shortly. But Lorenzo Doss and Kayvon Webster have been stepping up tremendously, and obviously you got a guy like Bradley Roby, who's number one cornerback for many NFL teams in the league. So it's very exciting. Preseason gets ready to kick off, and obviously it kicks off this Sunday between the Indianapolis Colts and the Green Bay Packers in the Hall of Fame game. Don't expect to see the starters play too much, maybe a series or two, and then the rest is backups. A lot of these guys trying to fight for a roster spot. So with that said, let's cover and let's go through what the matchups are currently for Week 1 of the NFL preseason. Obviously, the Indianapolis Colts and Green Bay Packers in the Hall of Fame game. But Tampa Bay opens up their preseason against the Philadelphia Eagles, the new era under Doug Peterson as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. You got the Washington Redskins taking on Dan Quinn's Atlanta Falcons. See if Matt Ryan can have a great year this year, obviously with Julio Jones kind of redeeming themselves for the year they kind of had last year. They had a promising start and ended up blundering towards the end. The Carolina Panthers open up their first week of preseason at Baltimore, where we look to see probably Joe Flacco will not play after coming off ACL surgery, but we're going to see that matchup as well. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who currently are the team that everyone's got a question mark on. They got a lot of talent on paper, but don't know how it's going to translate onto the field. Obviously drafting Jalen Ramsey, having Allen Hurns, Allen Robinson at the wide receiver spots, and also Julius Thomas at tight end, Blake Bortles back at quarterback. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see Jacksonville this year. They're kind of my sleeper team in that division over there. They're taking on the New York Jets. And then we got the Saints taking on the New England Patriots in New England. Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to see a couple series, and then they're going to play the backups the rest of the way. And then obviously Denver at Chicago. Okay, and that's the first. August 11th is the first day. That's next Thursday that you see all those games on NFL Network. They'll be playing on there, and also if you have the local channels respectively in that area, you'll get all those games as well. So Friday, August 12th, preseason opens up with the Miami Dolphins taking on the New York Giants as well. Detroit travels to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. The Minnesota Vikings take on the Bengals in Cincinnati, and you have the Browns and the new redefined direction that they're headed with Hugh Jackson traveling to Lambeau Field to take on Green Bay Packers. I don't expect to see Jordy Nelson play. He's currently on the physically unable to play or perform list as a precaution to hold him out in case he doesn't want to hurt his knee again. And then we got the Oakland Raiders taking on the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. And that wraps up pretty much all of Friday, August 12th games. Then we move on to Saturday, August 13th, and this will conclude the week one preseason spectacular that we got going on. That's Seattle taking on Kansas City in Kansas City. And then you got the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Buffalo Bills as well. And then so when that happens, obviously you got the game on ESPN between the Dallas Cowboys and the St. Louis Rams. And then you finish off Saturday's slate of games with San Diego at the Tennessee Titans. And then Sunday concludes week one of the NFL preseason with the Houston Texans traveling to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. I don't know about all you guys, but I'm pretty dang excited to hear the fact that NFL is back. We don't have to worry about having to sit here and wait for football to come and have to sit here and wait and to follow all the offseason drama. Football is here, and it's fast approaching. We're only just days away from seeing a first kickoff of NFL preseason for this season. And I'm very excited. I'm really eager to see what this year in the NFL has in store for us. And obviously some storylines will play out throughout the preseason. We'll be sure to cover that as well on the Coach's Corner podcast next week. So I'm very excited about that. Things to watch for here in the next couple weeks. Obviously, Madden 17 comes out on August 23rd. You can play it 5 days early with EA Access on the Xbox One. So if you have Xbox One, go to EA Access on your store. Download that. Sign up for a subscription. A 1 month subscription at a time only costs $4.99. With that, on August 16th, you'll be able to access Madden 17 5 days earlier than everybody else to play it early before the game is released. And that's going to be exciting as well. A whole new dynamic in gameplay. It always evolves every single year. Very excited about that. That's the one time I always end sick at work is when Madden comes out. That's always a sick day for me. I always stay home and catch that. So we're going to review that as well whenever the game comes out. It looks great so far. Looking forward to playing with it. And August 20th in Las Vegas, MGM Arena, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 2 will happen here in just about 2 weeks. Very excited to see that rematch and see if Conor McGregor can find some redemption after losing to Nate Diaz in their first matchup. So they've had an actual training camp to prepare for. And that's certainly going to be a good one. We're going to catch all the media hype and the circus train here next week as that whole promo and campaign kicks off for this event as well. So thank you here for listening today on the Coach's Corner podcast. I enjoy every single one of you listeners. Please go on iTunes and leave a review. I prefer a 5-star review, but if you don't like the show, you know what? Let me know. Let me know the feedback. I love your feedback. It helps me grow. It helps me make adjustments in my broadcast. And if you want to be on the show in the future or anything at all, just send me a message. Contact me. Tweet me on Twitter at Cody Rourke NFL. Go to CodyRourke18.com. Click the contact tab, and I'll be notified of it. I'll respond right away. I usually respond to everything within an hour of my phone because pretty much I run my business from my phone, and I enjoy communicating with everybody, talking sports. So if you want to be on the show, debate sports, we can make that happen. But until then, enjoy the week. Stay safe. Gladiators take on the Silverbacks in the semifinal playoffs here this week, and I'll be doing that, calling the defense. Very excited about that. Winner goes to the AFL Championship. I might recap that next week. However, I'm excited that football's back. Getting ready to start up high school football here next week. Practices begin in about a week and a half. So my summer's been busy coaching, and I just love sports. I love talking about it. So we're going to expand on that later on. But I appreciate every single one of you listeners all around the world on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, wherever you are out there in the world. I thank you for supporting the Coach's Corner podcast, and I look forward to next week's show as we cover week 1 of the NFL preseason, and we're probably just going to cover the preseason game between the Colts and the Packers, the Hall of Fame game. We're going to cover that. Look forward to week 2's matchups of the NFL preseason. We talk about that next week after everything's all said and done here on the Coach's Corner podcast. Thank you for tuning in. The Coach's Corner podcast is brought to you by CodyWork18.com, and the show is now on iHeartRadio. Download the iHeartRadio app and search for the Coach's Corner podcast with Cody Rourke to listen to past, present, and future episodes of the show.